Welcome to the weekly Torah Power-up based on the wisdom and teachings of the Rebbe, brought to you by Chabad of Nebraska. Nearly 5,781 years ago, God created the world. The world was perfectly balanced, symmetrical. Everything was even. Then God shook everything up, made everything unbalanced, made everything uneven, made everything asymmetrical. Nothing matched anymore. It is now our job to try to bring that balance back. Now, if we look into anything that we see around us, everything throughout the world, you'll find sides. You'll find things from one side versus the other. And our job is to bring the balance of those two sides back together. Reveal that they are really two sides of the same coin. And one example that we find throughout everything in the world, throughout ourselves as well as throughout all kinds of creations that you may see, there is a concept of masculinity and femininity. The masculine is very raw, has brute force. In Kabbalistic terms, we describe God as the masculine being. On the other side, you have the feminine force. The feminine force is about perfecting the brute force, making it something perfect, taking the spark, taking the energy and really perfecting it, taking it to a level that it could never be on its own. And this concept is found in everything. And so too, and the opposite of, or the other side of God's masculinity is humanity's femininity, taking the energy that lives without the world and throughout the world and taking it and restructuring it and perfecting it and recreating it. And that is really our job throughout our lives, is finding those imbalances and really perfecting it back together and really putting the evenness back in there. Now, throughout the world we find it, and even within the Torah itself. Within the Torah itself, we'll find that there are a masculine and a feminine. There's odds and evens. You have the Torah, when it was given, roughly 3,500 years ago. Moses went on Mount Sinai and received the Torah from God. And he came back down with actually a two-part Torah. He came back with the written Torah, the Torah that we have now written, the 5 books of Moses, with all of the laws and all the rules written inside it. This is the entire Torah. However, what we did not see, what was not written down, what was known as the oral tradition. The oral tradition was meant, and specifically not written down, given orally and given from master to student, from teacher to student, from father to son, from generation to generation, reaching all the way back to the times of Moses. And the job of the oral tradition, of the oral Torah, and really it's not an oral tradition, it is really a Torah on itself. It is understanding the written Torah. It is understanding what God wants, what was written in the 5 books of Moses. What does that mean? How do we translate it? And in other words, taking that same concept of masculinity and femininity, the written law is the pure brute force. It's the facts. It's the law. And the oral tradition and the oral law is there to perfect it and show how it's really all one perfect, harmonious concept. And we have to study both aspects of the Torah. We need to have both. We need to have the written tradition. We need to have the hardline facts. And then we have to have the oral tradition really smoothing out the edges and showing us how it's really a perfect, harmonious concept. And you cannot have one without the other. There were many factions in Judaism throughout thousands of years that tried to take the written Torah and separate it from the oral tradition, trying to separate those two concepts, trying to take just the brute force. And you can't live that way. It is not a way, it is not possible to have a life in that way. You need to have the two concepts, the two forces really meshing and coming together and making it into one. And showing the feminine force, showing the power of the masculine force, and really bringing out the true beauty of it. This is really a very important concept and a very important thing to remember, that we must have this balance. Now, this very similar concept is very important these few days, these few weeks, right before the holiday of Rosh Hashanah. the holiday where we crown God as king again, and we also ask for forgiveness. We also go back and we go to God and we say, these are the things that we may have done incorrectly. These are the things that we may not have done the proper and exactly correct way. And our job is to ask God for forgiveness. Now, the concept of forgiveness is really this beautiful feminine energy, really saying that something that was there before could be re-perfected and shown to be in its true beauty. And the concept of forgiveness can only be given by God with this aspect of femininity. And that brings together, again, that concept of the masculine and feminine coming together, the two energies, and bringing perfect harmony and balance. Something may have been done wrong, but you can be forgiven for it. And it can come back together and make perfect harmony. And that is, again, the job of us, our job, to bring these two concepts together, to bring symmetry back to everything in the world. And it's not just the masculine and feminine. It could be without anything that you may see. That there is supposed to be a balance and a harmony and a perfection, that everything comes together and is really one harmonious thing.